I didn't come home because I missed it. I came home because the army told me to slow down. That was the polite version. The real version was a doctor with a clipboard telling me I'd pushed myself too hard for too long and needed a few months of leave. Not punishment, not retirement, just time. Time to heal a shoulder that never quite stopped aching and a nervous system that refused to shut off at night. I was 36 years old, 12 years into my military career, and I had never taken a break longer than 2 weeks. So when my command approved extended leave, I did what made sense. I went back to the only place that still technically counted as home. The house sat at the edge of a quiet town most people passed through without stopping. Same street, same cracked driveway, same porch railing that leaned a little to the left. The house my parents had owned before they passed. The house my sister never left. Her name is Karen. She's older than me by 5 years. Growing up, she was the one who stayed. I was the one who left. College, officer training, deployments, promotions. Karen stayed in town, worked local jobs, took care of our parents when they got sick, and eventually moved into the house full-time. By the time I came back in uniform for their funerals, she already knew where everything was kept. When I told her I was coming home for a few months, she sounded relieved. Too relieved. Good, she said. You need rest. You can't live like you're still 25. I didn't argue. I hadn't slept through the night in years. The first week back was quiet, almost aggressively normal. I unpacked into my old bedroom, the one with the narrow closet and the window that faced the backyard. Karen cooked dinner every night, real food, not the kind I microwaved back on base. She asked about my shoulder, my paperwork, my timeline for returning. Normal questions, family questions. I noticed she paid attention to small things. What time I went to bed, whether I took the medication the doctor prescribed, how long I stayed in the shower. She framed it as concern, and I let it pass because that's what you do when you're tired and someone else is doing the worrying for once. During the day, I tried to reset myself. Physical therapy in the morning, light workouts, long walks around the neighborhood I'd sworn I'd never come back to. At night, I shut down early, no phone, no TV, just darkness, and the sound of the house settling. The first night it happened, I didn't think much of it. I woke up with that familiar jolt, the one that comes when your body reacts before your brain catches up. My eyes opened and for a second I couldn't place where I was. The room felt wrong, too still. Then I saw her. Karen was standing near the foot of my bed. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, her face turned toward me, hands folded in front of her like she was waiting for something. I stared at her, still half asleep, and my first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. "What are you doing?" I asked. She blinked like she'd just realized I was awake. "I thought you were up," she said. "I heard you moving." I hadn't been moving. I was asleep, I said. "Oh." She gave a small shrug like that explained everything. "Sorry, go back to sleep." She turned and left the room, closing the door behind her. I lay there for a few seconds staring at the ceiling, letting my heart rate come back down. It felt awkward, but not threatening. She lived there. I was the guest. Maybe she'd heard a noise. Maybe I'd kicked the bed frame. Old houses made sounds. By morning, I'd already filed it away as nothing. The next day went on like the others. Breakfast, physical therapy, a call from my unit checking in. Karen reminded me to ice my shoulder. She asked if I slept okay. Fine, I said, and meant it. That night, I went to bed a little earlier than usual. The medication made me drowsy, heavy in a way that pulled me under fast. I woke up again in the dark. This time I knew exactly where I was. Karen stood closer to the bed than before, near my side, close enough that I could make out her outline clearly. Even with the lights off, she was looking at me, not checking on me, not glancing to see if I was awake. Looking, steady, focused. I didn't speak right away. I watched her watch me. My pulse kicked up sharp and fast the same way it had overseas when something didn't match the pattern it was supposed to follow. She noticed my eyes open and straightened slightly. "You scared me," she said, like I'd done something wrong. "You were standing over me," I said. "I was making sure you were breathing," she replied. I waited for the joke that didn't come. "I'm fine," I said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Good, you should sleep." She left again, quiet as before. I didn't go back to sleep. By morning, my shoulder hurt more than usual. The dull ache flaring with the tension I hadn't shaken off. Over coffee, Karen chatted about grocery prices and a neighbor's new truck. She didn't mention the night. I didn't either. On the third night, I woke up before she realized I was awake. That was the moment something shifted. Not into panic, into awareness. I felt the presence before I opened my eyes, a change in the room, a pressure that didn't belong. When I looked, she was there, same spot, same posture, same silence. I stayed still watching her through half-lowered lids. She didn't touch anything, didn't reach for me. She just stood there breathing slow like she had all the time in the world. Then she turned and left. I lay there afterward staring at the door, my mind already running through possibilities. Sleepwalking, stress, my own messed up sleep patterns. None of them sat right, but none of them crossed into outright danger either. Karen wasn't a stranger. She was my sister, the woman who'd held my hand when our father died, the one who'd sent care packages to places she couldn't pronounce. People don't just become threats overnight. Still, when I got up the next morning, I locked my phone with a new code and slid it under my pillow without really thinking about it. I kept my eyes closed and counted my breaths until the sound of her footsteps faded down the hallway. That was new, the counting, I mean. I'd done it before overseas, lying awake in places where sleep came in pieces. I hadn't done it at home. Home was supposed to be where you didn't need tricks. I got up before Karen the next morning and made coffee myself. Not because I wanted it, because I wanted to hear how the house sounded when no one else was moving. The floors creaked in predictable places. The pipes knocked once when the water heated. The refrigerator hummed like it always had. Nothing unexpected. Karen came into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair pulled back, wearing one of our father's old sweatshirts. She smiled like everything was normal. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She nodded like that made sense. "That medication does that sometimes." She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching me the way people do when they're waiting for something to come up in conversation. I didn't give her anything. The rest of the day stayed quiet. I went to physical therapy. I ran a short errand. I answered emails from my unit. Nothing felt off until it was dark again. I went to bed a little later that night. I left the lamp on longer than usual, scrolling through my phone, letting my eyes burn just enough that sleep would take me whether I wanted it or not. When I woke up, the room was darker than before. Karen was standing closer this time, near enough that I could see the outline of her face without straining. Her eyes were open wide, fixed on me like she was afraid to blink. I didn't speak. I watched her watch me. Seconds passed, maybe longer. Time does that thing at night where it stretches without asking permission. She shifted her weight slightly, like she'd been standing there longer than was comfortable. That's when I knew this wasn't accidental. You don't accidentally stand still long enough to get uncomfortable. My heart started to pound. Not loud, not frantic, controlled but fast. "Karen," I said. She flinched. "Oh, you're awake," she said, again. The same words, same tone. "Yes," I said. "I am." She cleared her throat. "You looked restless." I wasn't. She smiled thin and quick. "That's good." She turned and walked out, closing the door behind her without looking back. I sat up in bed and waited for my breathing to settle. I didn't chase her. I didn't call out. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just sat there and thought. If this were anyone else, I would have already reacted. Asked questions, changed rooms, set rules. But this wasn't anyone else. This was my sister, standing in the house she'd lived in for years, checking on me the way she always said she did. I didn't sleep much after that. By morning, my patience was thinner than I liked to admit. Karen acted normal, too normal. She asked if I wanted eggs or cereal. She reminded me about a follow-up appointment I hadn't told her the date of. "I've got it," I said. "I know," she said. "I just don't want you forgetting things." That stuck with me longer than it should have. The next night, I stayed awake on purpose. I lay on my back, eyes closed, breathing slow and even listening to the sounds of the house. The hallway light clicked off, a door closed. The television murmured faintly from Karen's room before going silent. I waited. At some point, my body betrayed me. Not fully asleep, but not fully awake either. That in-between place where you lose track of time and your muscles go slack. That's when I felt it again, the shift in the room. I opened my eyes just enough to see her silhouette. Karen stood at the side of my bed, closer than she'd ever been before. I could see the outline of her hand hanging at her side. I could hear her breathing, slow, controlled. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stood there watching. I wanted to say her name, wanted to sit up and force a conversation neither of us seemed interested in having during the day. but something held me back. Not fear. Curiosity, the same instinct that makes you stay still when you think you've spotted something in the dark. I stayed quiet. After a long moment, she leaned forward slightly, like she was checking my face for signs of movement. My pulse spiked, but I didn't react. She straightened again, then left the room without a sound. I lay there afterward, staring at the ceiling, my mind running through possibilities I didn't like. Sleepwalking didn't fit. You don't sleepwalk with purpose. Stress didn't fit either. Neither did concern. Concern looks different. It has words attached to it. This felt deliberate. The next morning, I installed a basic motion app on my phone and propped it up facing the doorway. Nothing fancy, nothing obvious, just something to tell me if someone crossed that line while I was asleep. Karen watched me set it up. "What's that?" she asked. "Just tracking my sleep," I said. She tilted her head. "Seems unnecessary. So does standing in my room at night," I said, keeping my tone flat. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just checking on you. I don't need checking," I said. She held my gaze a second too long. "You're not the best judge of that right now." That was the first time she'd said something that felt like a line being crossed. That night, I left the phone exactly where it was and turned off the screen. I lay down and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The phone vibrated softly as the app registered movement. I felt it through the mattress before I heard anything else. Karen stood in the doorway just inside the frame this time. She looked at the phone, then at me like she was deciding which mattered more. I opened my eyes fully. She didn't leave right away. "Why are you recording?" she asked. "I'm not," I said. "I'm monitoring." "For what?" "For patterns." She frowned. "You're reading too much into things." "Maybe," I said. "But you're still here." She stared at me, something sharp flashing across her face before she masked it. Then she stepped back and closed the door. I lay there after she left the phone warm against my hand, the vibration still buzzing faintly in my palm. I didn't stop the app. I didn't move it. I didn't confront her. I just listened to the house settle again, each sound falling back into its place. And for the first time since I'd come home, I didn't wonder if I was imagining things. I wondered why Karen cared so much whether I noticed. I didn't move the phone after that. I just slid it farther under the pillow and let my hand rest on it like it was part of the mattress. The next day, I adjusted my routine without announcing it. I woke up earlier. I stopped taking the sleep medication. I made a point of walking through the house at random times, checking doors, windows, and the back hallway that led to the laundry room. Everything stayed exactly where it was supposed to be. Karen watched all of this without commenting. That bothered me more than if she'd said something. By the third night in a row, the pattern was clear. I fell asleep. I woke up. She was there. The timing varied by a few minutes, but the behavior didn't. Same spot, same silence. Same fixed attention. If I spoke, she left. If I stayed still, she stayed longer. I started measuring it. That's what training does to you. When something doesn't make sense emotionally, you strip it down to data. How long she stood there. Whether her breathing changed. Whether she checked the doorway before stepping inside. She always did. I didn't confront her during the day. Not yet. Daytime, Karen was calm, efficient, almost helpful to a fault. She reminded me to stretch. She set alarms on my phone for appointments I hadn't asked her to track. She refilled prescriptions before I noticed they were low. "You're healing," she said once, handing me a bottle of pills I was sure I still had half of. "Let me handle the details." I took them because it was easier than arguing. At night, I stopped pretending this was about concern. One evening, I rearranged the room slightly, moved the chair closer to the door, shifted the nightstand. Small things, nothing obvious. I wanted to see if she noticed. She did. That night, she paused in the doorway longer than usual, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. The motion app buzzed softly under my pillow. Her jaw tightened. "You moved things," she said quietly. "Yes," I said. "Why I like the layout better." She didn't respond. She just stood there longer than before, her gaze flicking briefly to the nightstand, then back to my face. That was the first time I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't about whether I was breathing. This was about whether things were where she expected them to be. The next morning, I went for a longer walk than usual, looping around the neighborhood twice before coming back. When I stepped inside, Karen was standing in the living room, my laptop open on the coffee table. She looked up quickly. "You left it unlocked." "I didn't ask you to check it." "I wasn't checking," she said. "I was making sure it was charging. The charger wasn't plugged in." I closed the laptop without saying anything and carried it back to my room. I locked it and slid it into my bag. Karen followed me to the doorway and leaned against the frame watching. "You're being defensive," she said. "I'm being careful. With your own sister?" "Yes." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "You don't trust me." I didn't answer. That night, I didn't wait for her to show up. I lay awake staring at the door, counting the seconds between the house settling and the sound of her footsteps. When she appeared, I was already alert. She stepped into the room and froze when she saw my eyes open. "You're awake," she said, like it surprised her every time. "I am now." She didn't leave right away. "You don't sleep much anymore," she said. "I sleep fine when no one's watching me." Her expression flickered. Annoyance. Then something else. Something closer to frustration. "I'm trying to help you," she said. "By standing in my room at night?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. That answer landed heavier than I expected. "How is that helping?" I asked. She took a step closer. "You don't notice things when you're tired. You forget. You miss details." "I don't miss much," I said. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You'd be surprised." She left after that, closing the door behind her like she always did. I stayed awake, my thoughts running tighter circles than before. By the end of the week, my body felt wired. No medication, no deep sleep. Just short bursts of rest followed by long stretches of waiting. I didn't feel panicked. I felt focused. Karen adjusted to my changes with unsettling ease. When I stopped leaving my phone out, she stopped looking for it. When I locked my door, she tested the handle once, then didn't try again. Instead, she stood on the other side. The motion app picked it up every time. She never knocked. During the day, I made the call to my unit to check in. Nothing formal, just a quick update. My voice sounded steady, normal, no signs of concern from their end. I didn't mention the nights. Karen listened from the kitchen, pretending not to. Later, she brought me lunch and set it down a little too precisely, aligning the plate with the edge of the table. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. "I'm not." She watched me eat, her eyes tracking each movement. I set the fork down slowly. "You don't need to watch me," I said. She blinked. "I'm not." That night, she stayed longer than ever before. I lay still, eyes closed, counting my breaths. Her presence pressed into the room, heavy and deliberate. I felt her lean forward again, closer to my face, close enough that I could hear the quiet catch in her breathing. She whispered something then. Not words, just a sound, a soft exhale, like she was testing whether I'd react. I didn't. After she left, I sat up and stared at the door, my hands steady, my pulse calm. This wasn't random, it wasn't stress, and it wasn't concern. This was someone making sure things stayed the way they wanted them. By morning, I wasn't asking myself if Karen was watching me anymore. I was asking myself what she thought she was protecting and why she needed me asleep to do it. I started locking my door at night, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft turn of the knob after I laid down, the click barely audible over the hum of the house. I didn't announce it, I didn't explain it. I wanted to see what she'd do when access wasn't automatic. Karen noticed immediately. The first night I locked it, the handle turned once, slow, careful, then it stopped. I stayed still, listening to her breathing on the other side. She didn't knock, she didn't speak. She stood there long enough that my phone buzzed twice under the pillow, then she walked away. In the morning, she didn't mention the door. Instead, she handed me a printed schedule with my appointments highlighted in yellow. Physical therapy, follow-up imaging, a phone check-in with a base counselor I hadn't asked for. I organized things, she said. "You've got a lot going on. I didn't ask you to do that." "You don't have to ask," she said. "You're recovering." That word again. Recovering. Like I was fragile glass instead of a grown woman with a uniform hanging in the closet. I folded the paper and set it on the counter. "I can manage my own schedule." She watched me fold it, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been forgetting things." "I haven't." "You forgot your medication Tuesday." "I skipped it on purpose." She frowned. "That's not what the doctor said." I looked at her. "When did you talk to my doctor?" She hesitated. "Just long enough. He called the house," she said. "Left a message." I returned it. My stomach tightened. "You don't have permission to do that." "You gave me permission," she said too quickly. "A while ago." I knew exactly what she was referring to. A general power of attorney I'd signed before a deployment years back. Limited, specific, and expired. I'd handled that paperwork myself. Twice. "I didn't," I said. She smiled in a way that felt rehearsed. You're misremembering. That was the first time she tried to tell me what I remembered. The house shifted after that. Not physically, in the way conversations did. In what she asked and what she assumed. She started answering the phone when it rang, even if it was near me. She opened mail before I saw it and left it neatly stacked on my desk, like she was doing me a favor. One afternoon, I came back from physical therapy to find my shoulder brace missing. Did you move it? I asked. It was uncomfortable, she said. You don't need it around the house. That's not your call. I live here, she said. I see how you move. I found the brace later tucked into a hall closet behind winter coats. Not thrown away, hidden. At night, the watching didn't stop. It adjusted. When the door was locked, she stood outside it. When I left the phone visible, she didn't touch it. When I hit it, she scanned the room longer. Her eyes flicking to places that made no sense unless she knew where things had been before. She started commenting on details I hadn't shared. You've been emailing your unit late, she said one morning, stirring her coffee. That can't be good for your sleep. How would you know that? She shrugged. Your laptop light was on. I hadn't turned it on in the living room. I'd used it in my room door closed. I stopped taking my meds completely after that. Not out of stubbornness, out of clarity. I wanted to know what I felt without chemical interference. What I felt was watched. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years of training to notice changes in environment, threats, in motion, inconsistencies in behavior. And the most unsettling thing I'd encountered in a long time was my sister rearranging my life with a smile. I tried once to reset things. Karen, I said, sitting across from her at the table, I appreciate the help, but I need space. She leaned back in her chair. You're not thinking clearly? I am. You're tired. So are you, I said. Standing in my room at night would do that. Her eyes flashed. I told you, I'm checking on you. I don't need checking. You say that now, she said. But you don't always know what's best for you. That landed wrong. Too practiced. Too confident. I've known what's best for me since I was 18, I said. I didn't need supervision then. I don't need it now. She stared at me, her jaw tightening. This isn't about supervision. Then what is it about? She didn't answer. She stood up and took her coffee mug to the sink, scrubbing it longer than necessary. That night, I left the door unlocked. Not because I trusted her, because I wanted to see what she'd do when she thought things were back to normal. She came in quietly like she always did. Same spot, same stillness, but something in her posture was different. More alert, more attentive. Like she was checking more than my breathing. Her eyes moved around the room, lingering on the nightstand, the chair, the corner near the closet. I realized she was inventorying, making sure nothing had changed without her knowing. She leaned forward slightly closer than before. I felt the air shift as she moved. I stayed still. She straightened, exhaled softly, then left. In the morning, she was already dressed when I came into the kitchen. I scheduled a call for you this afternoon, she said. Just to touch base. About your leave. With who? She hesitated again. A counselor. Through the base. I didn't ask for that. You need support, she said. You're not sleeping. You're paranoid. You're seeing things. I set my coffee down carefully. I'm not seeing things. She met my gaze, her voice calm. Then why do you think I'm watching you? I didn't answer. She nodded like that confirmed something for her. The call never happened. I canceled it before she realized I had access to the scheduling portal she thought she'd locked down. She didn't bring it up. Instead, she cooked dinner and asked if I wanted seconds. The watching continued. So did the small intrusions, the subtle corrections, the way she spoke to me like I was a responsibility instead of a person. I stopped trying to reason it out emotionally. I started paying attention operationally, what she knew, what she assumed, what she corrected before I noticed. By the end of the week, the word care didn't fit anymore. What Karen was doing had structure, intention, boundaries I hadn't agreed to. And whatever she thought she was managing, she only seemed comfortable doing it when I was lying still in the dark. I noticed it first in my email, not the content, the timing. Messages I knew I hadn't opened were already marked as read, calendar invites. I didn't remember accepting showed up as confirmed. A reminder for a benefits review appeared on my schedule, slotted neatly between physical therapy and a call with my unit, like it had always belonged there. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and scrolled slowly the way you do when you're not ready to admit what you're seeing. Karen was in the other room, humming while she folded laundry. I clicked into my sent folder. There it was. An email sent from my account to a base administrator. Polite, professional, perfectly written. It referenced my recovery timeline and included language about temporary limitations and continued monitoring. I hadn't written it. I checked the metadata. Same device, same network. Sent at 2:18 a.m. I closed the laptop and listened to the hum stop abruptly in the other room. You send emails at night now? Karen asked from the doorway. I looked up. Sometimes. She nodded. That makes sense. You've been restless. I didn't ask how she knew the time. I reopened the laptop and pulled up my benefits portal. Everything looked fine at first glance. No missing payments, no red flags. Then I drilled down, a change to my emergency contact. Karen's name moved to the top. A permissions update allowing her to receive notifications about appointments and evaluations. I felt my jaw tighten. That update required verification. My phone buzzed softly on the table. A code notification I hadn't requested. It disappeared a second later like it had been swiped away. Karen's phone was face down in her hand. You shouldn't dig through that stuff right now, she said. It's stressful. I'm not stressed, I said. I'm checking. She stepped closer. You trust me, right? The question wasn't casual. It was positioned. Like she was already writing the answer down somewhere. I trust systems, I said. People have to earn it. Her mouth tightened. I'm your sister, yes, I said. And I didn't authorize changes to my account. She exhaled slowly. You were busy, you asked me to help. I didn't. You don't remember everything, she said gently. That's not a judgment. It's just where you are right now. That word again. Remember, I pushed the laptop away and stood up. I'm going for a walk. You just had therapy. I'm cleared. She watched me grab my jacket, her eyes following every movement like she was memorizing it. Be back soon. I'll be back when I'm done. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean, like it was doing me a favor. I walked fast, my mind lining up facts the way it always had. Dates, times, access points. Karen didn't have my passwords. Not all of them, but she had the house network. She had my phone more often than I like to admit. She had information I'd given her without thinking. She also had something else, a reason. I circled the block twice, then turned back. When I stepped inside, Karen was at the computer again. My computer. The one I'd locked before leaving. You shouldn't leave it open, she said. Anyone could get in. It wasn't open, she smiled. It was when I checked. I didn't argue. I went to my room and pulled my duffel from under the bed. Inside were copies of paperwork I always kept habit drilled in early. Orders, evaluations, medical summaries. I spread them out on the bed and compared them to what was in the system. Small differences, language shifts, a note added to one report referencing sleep disturbances, another mentioning external support at home. External support, that phrasing didn't come from me. That evening my unit called. Just a check-in, they said. Nothing formal. My commander's voice was steady, familiar. How's the leave treating you, he asked. Productive, I said. Good. We received an update about your recovery plan. My hand tightened around the phone. From who a note came through the medical channel, he said. Just flagging that you might need extended monitoring before full duty. I didn't submit that, I said. There was a pause. It came from your account. I glanced toward the doorway. Karen stood there listening. I'll follow up, I said. Directly. Do that, he said. No concerns otherwise. The call ended. Karen stepped fully into the room. You didn't need to upset them, she said. I didn't. You sound defensive, she said. That doesn't help your case. What case? She folded her arms. You've been erratic. You're not sleeping. You're accusing me of things. I'm noticing things, I said. There's a difference. She tilted her head. From the outside, it doesn't look that way. I stared at her. What outside? The system, she said. The people who decide whether you're fit to go back. That was the moment the floor shifted. You talked to them, I said. I helped clarify things, she replied. They don't know you like I do. You don't know me like that, I said. She stepped closer. I know when you're not okay. You don't get to decide that. She smiled, small and patient. Someone has to. That night I didn't lock the door. I didn't move the phone. I didn't rearrange anything. I lay there, eyes closed, letting my breathing settle into a pattern that wasn't sleep. Karen came in at the usual time. She paused longer than before, her attention split between my face and the desk, where my papers now sat stacked neatly. She walked over to them, touched the top page lightly, then looked back at me. Her eyes lingered, searching for signs I was awake. I stayed still. She exhaled, soft and satisfied, then straightened the stack before leaving. I waited until her footsteps faded before opening my eyes. The betrayal didn't feel dramatic. It felt methodical, administrative, the kind that hides behind good intentions and tidy language. Lying there in the dark, I didn't think about yelling or confronting her. I thought about access, documentation, processes, and how many decisions had already been made while I was asleep. I slept for 90 minutes that night. Not straight, not deep. 90 minutes stitched together in pieces, my body dropping just long enough to reset before snapping back awake. By morning, my head felt packed with cotton, and my thoughts moved a half step behind where they should have been. Karen noticed immediately. "You look exhausted," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "You didn't sleep again." "I slept," I said. "Some." She studied my face like she was checking a list. "That's not enough." I drank the coffee even though it tasted wrong, too bitter, or maybe that was just me. Over the next few days, the fatigue started showing up in ways I couldn't ignore. I forgot the name of a physical therapist I'd been seeing twice a week. I lost track of what day it was and had to check my phone twice to be sure. I stared at an email from my unit longer than necessary, rereading the same sentence like it might change. Karen filled in the gaps without asking. She reminded me when to leave, when to eat, when to rest. She spoke softly, calmly, the way people do when they think you're fragile. "Your brain needs time," she said one afternoon, as I sat on the couch staring at nothing in particular. "You've been running on adrenaline for years." "I'm not broken," I said. She smiled. "I didn't say you were," but she said it with her eyes. I started wondering if maybe she was right. Not about everything. Not about the watching, but about me. The military does that to you. Trains you to trust assessments, evaluations, reports. If something is flagged enough times, you start to look for the problem in yourself instead of the system. Karen knew that. She started dropping phrases into conversation, casual but pointed. Sleep deprivation can cause paranoia. PTSD doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes people don't remember giving consent. I argued less than I should have. Part of me was tired of fighting. Another part wanted this to be simpler, wanted the explanation to be me, not her. One afternoon, she handed me a printed article about stress-related cognitive distortion. "I thought you might want to read this," she said. I skimmed the first paragraph, then folded it and set it aside. "I don't need research. You need perspective," she said. That night when she stood in my doorway, I didn't feel the same sharp alertness as before. I felt heavy, slow, like my reactions were dragging behind my thoughts. She watched me longer than usual, her eyes moving carefully like she was checking boxes. "You should take the meds tonight," she said quietly. "I don't like how they make me feel. They help you sleep. They make me foggy. That's temporary," she said. "Stability matters more." I stared at her. Stability for who? She didn't answer. The next morning I woke up late. That never happened to me, not without a reason. Karen was already dressed, her hair neat, a plate of food waiting on the table. She looked relieved when I came out of my room. "See," she said, "that's better." I rubbed my face. "What time is it? Almost 10. That landed like a slap. I sat down heavily, my shoulder aching more than usual. Karen slid the plate closer. "You needed the rest. I had an appointment. I rescheduled it," she said. "No harm done." "You can't keep doing that," I said, but my voice didn't have the force it should have. She tilted her head. "You're overwhelmed." "I'm helping." I looked at the plate, then up at her. "I feel like I'm losing control." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "You're safe." That wasn't what I'd said. Later that day, I tried to log into my account again and found my password didn't work. I reset it, changed it, logged out of everything. An hour later, Karen asked if I'd been having trouble with my email. I stared at her. "Why would you ask that?" "You seemed frustrated," she said. "I just want to make sure you're okay." I went into my room and shut the door. I sat on the bed and tried to think through everything that had happened since I'd come home. The nights, the paperwork, the calls, the way my confidence had eroded without me noticing. The common thread wasn't stress, it was proximity. That realization didn't bring relief. It brought doubt, because if Karen was doing this intentionally, then I'd missed it. And if I'd missed it, maybe I wasn't as sharp as I thought. That night when she stood in the room, I spoke before she could. "I'm sorry," I said. She stiffened. "For what?" "For accusing you," I said. "For reading too much into things." Her shoulders relaxed almost instantly. You don't need to apologize. I do, I said. I haven't been myself. She stepped closer. You've been under a lot of pressure. I shouldn't have pushed back so hard. She smiled then. Real this time. Warm. You're allowed to struggle. The smile made my stomach turn, and I couldn't figure out why. She stayed longer that night, standing at the edge of the bed, her presence heavy but calm. When she left, she pulled the door closed gently, like she was tucking something in place. The next day, I found a note on my desk, a reminder about a follow-up call, handwritten, neat. I didn't remember agreeing to it. I sat there for a long time staring at the paper, my thoughts circling the same question over and over. If I was really losing my edge, how would I know? And if Karen was right about me, why did she only seem comfortable managing things when I wasn't awake to object? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my body heavy, my mind buzzing just enough to keep me from drifting too far. When Karen stepped into the room, I didn't tense. I just watched the shadows shift as she took her usual place and wondered how many decisions felt easier when no one was looking back. I rolled onto my side and let my breathing slow until it felt boring. That was the trick. Boring breathing, even. Shallow enough to pass deep enough not to give me away. I'd learned it a long time ago, lying still in places where movement meant attention and attention meant trouble. I let my jaw slacken and my hands rest open, palms loose against the sheets. The house settled into its usual nighttime rhythm. A distant click as the thermostat adjusted. Pipes ticking once, silence stretching. I kept my eyes closed. Footsteps moved down the hall, light, familiar. Karen didn't try the handle this time. She didn't need to. The door eased open the way it always did, slow enough to avoid noise. She stepped inside. I focused on not reacting, not tightening, not tracking her with my eyes the way every instinct told me to. I counted my breaths again. 1, 2, 3. She stopped near the bed. The air changed as she leaned closer. I could feel it, the faint shift of pressure, the warmth of another body too close for comfort. She stayed there longer than usual, like she was deciding something. Her breathing was steady, controlled, not nervous. She wasn't checking on me. She was checking me. Her hand moved near the nightstand. I heard the soft brush of skin against wood. Papers rustled. The stack I'd left there, aligned and deliberate, shifted slightly. I didn't move. She exhaled through her nose, a quiet sound that felt like relief. Okay, she whispered. The word barely carried, but it landed hard. She straightened, then leaned in again, closer to my face. Close enough that I could smell her shampoo. Close enough that any mistake would give me away. You don't even know, she murmured. You don't see it. I stayed still. Her voice dropped lower. They listened to me. That's what matters. My pulse kicked up sharp and fast, but I kept my breathing even. She took a step back, then another, pacing once at the foot of the bed. Her footsteps were quiet, practiced. I've kept things running, she whispered. I've kept you safe, safe. That word again. She stopped moving. If you were awake, she said softly, you'd argue. You always argue. She let out a small, humorless laugh. This is easier. My fingers tingled with the urge to clench. I didn't let them. She moved toward the doorway, then paused. I can't let you mess this up, she said. Not to me exactly, but not to herself either. Not now. She left the room and closed the door gently behind her. I waited, counted breaths, listened for her steps to fade down the hall. When they did, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding hard enough that I was sure it would give me away through the walls. So that was it. Not concern, not confusion, control. I sat up slowly and reached for my phone, careful not to jostle the bed. The screen lit up in my hand. The motion app showed exactly what I expected, her entry. Her pause, her movement toward the nightstand. Time-stamped, clean. I didn't save the clip yet. I didn't back it up. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just sat there letting the adrenaline burn off, replaying her words in my head until they stopped blurring together. They listened to me. I swung my legs off the bed and padded to the door. I opened it a crack and looked down the hallway. Karen's bedroom door was closed. Light off. I went back to bed and lay down, eyes open this time, staring at the dark. Sleep didn't come. I didn't force it. Morning arrived quietly. Karen acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, asked if I wanted coffee, mentioned a call she'd scheduled for later in the day, the one I'd supposedly agreed to. I nodded and took the mug. My hand didn't shake. While she talked, I watched her hands, the way she moved, the confidence in her posture. This wasn't improvisation, this was habit. After breakfast, I went into my room and locked the door. I pulled out my duffel and started organizing, not packing, sorting, documents into one pile, devices into another. I changed passwords again this time, on a network she didn't know about. I enabled extra authentication, quiet fixes, invisible ones. At noon, Karen knocked. "You in there?" she asked. "Yes, you forgot your call." I didn't. Silence stretched. "You're shutting me out," she said. "I'm thinking," I replied. She didn't push. That was new. The afternoon passed in careful increments. I took notes. I wrote down everything she'd said the night before, word for word, while it was still sharp. I checked timestamps, cross-referenced access logs, built a small solid picture out of facts instead of feelings. By evening, my exhaustion had shifted. It wasn't the foggy drag from before. It was focused, purposeful. Karen cooked dinner and left a plate outside my door when I didn't come out. I waited until I heard her return to the kitchen before opening it. The food was still warm. That night, I didn't pretend to sleep. I lay on my back with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, my breathing shallow but steady. When Karen opened the door and saw my eyes on her, immediately, she froze. "Oh," she said. "You're awake." "Yes," I said. She didn't step inside. "You should get some rest," she said, her voice tight. "I will," I said, "when I'm done." Her eyes flicked past me, toward the nightstand, toward the papers that weren't there anymore. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I know," I said. She closed the door without another word. I stayed awake long after the house went quiet again, replaying her whispers, her pauses, the confidence threaded through every word. By the time sleep finally took me, I wasn't wondering whether I'd imagined any of it. I was thinking about how long she'd been deciding things for me, and how much damage gets done when no one expects resistance. I woke up with a clear head for the first time in weeks. Not rested, just clear. The kind of clarity that comes when confusion finally picks a shape and stops floating around. I didn't rush out of bed. I lay there and listened. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no doors, no presence hovering where it didn't belong. I got dressed and went straight to the garage. Karen kept boxes out there. Old paperwork? Things she said she was sorting through someday. I hadn't touched them because they weren't mine. That rule no longer applied. I opened the first box and found bank statements. Not recent. Not ancient either. A few years old. Some had my name on them. Others had hers. A few had both. I sat on the concrete floor and started lining them up. Patterns jumped out fast, transfers timed around deployments, account changes logged during windows when I'd been overseas or in training with limited access. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Always justified, always documented. I found copies of forms next, power of attorney updates, medical consent extensions, emergency contact revisions, all filed cleanly, all valid on paper. I checked the signatures. They weren't forged. They were mine, or close enough to pass. I remembered the briefings, the rush, signing stacks of documents before flights, trusting that the person sitting across from you had explained everything worth knowing. Karen had been there for some of those, standing just outside the office, offering to help organize things later. I flipped to the next folder, email printouts, screenshots, messages between Karen and a base administrator I recognized by name. The tone was careful, supportive, framed as concern. She's been under extreme stress. I'm worried she's minimizing symptoms. She trusts me to help manage things while she recovers. No lies, just framing. I stood up slowly, the concrete cold against my palms, and leaned back against the workbench. This wasn't a single bad decision. It was a system, built piece by piece while I was busy being elsewhere. I went back inside and locked my bedroom door. I spread everything out across the bed. I logged into my accounts using the new credentials I'd set. The changes matched the paperwork exactly. Karen hadn't hacked anything. She'd authorized herself. The watching wasn't about curiosity. It wasn't even about fear. It was quality control. I heard the front door open and close. Karen's footsteps moved through the house unhurried. She knocked once on my door. "Breakfast is ready," she said. I didn't answer. She knocked again, harder. "We need to talk." I opened the door and stepped aside. She came in and stopped short when she saw the bed. Her eyes dropped to the documents, then snapped back to my face. You went through my things, she said. They were my things, I replied. She inhaled sharply. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done any of this, I said, gesturing to the bed. She crossed her arms. I was protecting you, by managing my career without me, by keeping it intact, she said. You don't see how close you were to losing it. Because you were telling them I wasn't stable. I was telling them the truth, she said. You weren't sleeping. You were paranoid. You were accusing me of things that didn't make sense. They made perfect sense, I said. I just didn't have all the information. She paced once, then stopped. You've always been like this, rushing ahead, thinking you know better than everyone else. And you've always hated that, I said. Her mouth tightened. I didn't hate it. I worried about it. You worried about being left behind. She stared at me, then looked away. I stayed, she said quietly. I took care of everything while you were gone. I didn't ask you to run my life. Someone had to, she snapped. You disappear for months at a time and expect things to stay untouched. I expected them not to be rearranged without my consent. You consented, she said. You signed the forms. I trusted you, I said. That's the same thing, she replied. The room went quiet. I looked at her and saw it clearly now. Not malice, not panic, certainty. She believed this was hers to manage. You don't understand what would have happened if I hadn't stepped in, she said. They were already questioning things. I just guided the narrative. You decided I needed a narrative. You needed oversight. I laughed once, short and sharp. You stood in my room every night to check your work. She flinched. I needed to know if you were onto me. Onto what? Onto the fact that you're not as untouchable as you think, she said. They listen to me because I make sense. And I don't. You're too close to it, she said. I see the whole picture. I gathered the papers into a stack and slid them back into my bag. You see the picture you built? She stepped closer. If you take this outside the family, you'll ruin everything. Everything for who? For both of us, she said. You think they'll trust you after this? I met her gaze. I think they'll trust the documentation. Her confidence wavered for the first time. You don't want to do this, she said. I didn't want you doing it either, I replied. She stood there breathing shallow, her eyes darting to the door, to the bed, to the bag, at my feet. You're making a mistake, she said. No, I said. I'm correcting one. She left the room without another word. I sat on the bed and zipped the bag closed. I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. The kind of steady that comes when the problem finally stops. Pretending to be something else. That night, Karen didn't come into my room. She stood in the hallway instead. Quiet and watchful, like she was waiting for a signal that never came. I didn't confront Karen again after that. I didn't need to. Confrontation would have given her something to react to, something emotional to work with. I'd already seen how good she was at shaping emotions into leverage. I wasn't interested in giving her more raw material. Instead, I went quiet, not withdrawn, focused. I started with a clean notebook, paper not digital. Dates at the top of each page, times underneath. Every interaction, every access change, every comment she made that crossed from concern into control. I wrote it the same way I'd written after-action reports for years. No opinions, no speculation, just facts. At the same time, I worked the systems. I contacted my unit through a secure channel Karen didn't know existed. Not to accuse, not to complain, just to request copies, medical notes, administrative records, access logs. I framed it as routine, a personal audit before returning to duty. No one questioned it. They sent everything. I spent hours cross-referencing, matching timestamps, comparing language, noticing patterns. Karen's influence showed up in subtle ways, a phrase here, a recommendation there. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just enough pressure applied in the right places. I backed everything up twice. One encrypted drive stayed with me. The other went into a sealed envelope addressed to a legal assistance office on base. Not mailed, not yet, just prepared. Karen sensed the shift. She stopped trying to talk things out, stopped offering help. Instead, she hovered, lingered in doorways, asked vague questions. You've been busy, she said one evening, standing in the kitchen while I organized files on my laptop. Getting ready, I replied. For what? For work, she frowned. You're still on leave. Not forever, she leaned against the counter. You don't need to rush back. I'm not rushing, I said. I'm restoring baseline. She didn't like that word. That night, she didn't watch from the doorway. She didn't stand in the room. She stayed in her bedroom, the door cracked open just enough that I could see the light from the hall. It was restraint, calculated. The next morning I made a call, legal assistance, on base. I didn't give names, I didn't give accusations, I asked questions, hypotheticals. What happens when a power of attorney is used beyond its scope? How administrative influence is evaluated when it comes from family? What documentation matters most? The answers were calm, precise, unemotional, exactly what I needed. I started assembling the packet. Not a dramatic reveal, not a confrontation, just a clear chronological record of what had happened and how. I included my own mistakes, the forms I'd signed, the access I'd allowed. I didn't pretend I was blameless. That mattered. Karen watched me print the final pages without comment. She stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You're going to make me the villain," she said quietly. "I'm not making you anything," I replied. "I'm documenting. They won't see it your way. They won't see it my way," I said. "They'll see it the way the records show." She shook her head. "You always think structure protects you." "It does," I said. "When it's used correctly." She stepped closer. "You don't have to do this. I already did," I said. I left the house that afternoon with the packet secured in my bag and drove to the nearest base office. I didn't tell Karen where I was going. I didn't need to. The meeting was brief, professional, no raised voices, no shock, just careful attention. They asked questions. I answered. They reviewed documents, took notes, told me what the next steps would look like. I thanked them and left. When I got back, Karen was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, posture rigid. "You went behind my back," she said. "I went through the front door," I replied. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "You think this ends with paperwork? I think it ends with clarity." She stood up abruptly. "You're tearing the family apart." "I didn't start this," I said. "You're choosing them over me." "I'm choosing myself," I said. "You just don't recognize the difference." The days that followed were quiet in a new way. No hovering, no watching, no nighttime visits. Karen moved through the house like a guest, instead of a gatekeeper. She stopped answering my phone, stopped opening my mail, stopped making suggestions. The system did the rest. Follow-up calls came, requests for clarification, a formal review notice. Karen received one too. I didn't read it over her shoulder. I didn't need to. One evening she stood in the doorway of my room again, not watching, waiting. "You could stop this," she said. "So could you," I replied. She swallowed. "You really don't care what happens to me." "I care," I said. "I just don't let that override consent." She left without another word. I finished packing later that night, not rushing, just methodical. When I zipped the bag closed, the sound felt final without needing to be dramatic. Karen didn't come to my room after that. She stayed on her side of the house, the silence between us structured and deliberate. Not hostile, just defined. And for the first time since I'd come home, the house felt predictable again. Not safe, not warm, but stable, which was enough to sleep without someone standing over me checking their work in the dark. I didn't stay in the house while the review moved forward, not out of fear, out of efficiency. Distance sharpens perspective, and I needed mine intact. I checked into a short-term rental near the base, close enough to drive in for meetings, far enough that Karen couldn't reinsert herself into the margins of my day. The first call came 2 days later. Administrative, neutral, exactly the tone I expected. They wanted clarification on timelines, on access, on when certain permissions had been expanded and why those expansions weren't documented as temporary. I answered with dates. I answered with copies. I answered without editorializing. Karen tried to call me that night. I let it ring. The next morning, another call. This one included a legal officer and a medical liaison. No accusations, no conclusions, just questions designed to collapse ambiguity. "Did you authorize your sister to communicate with your unit on your behalf outside the scope of medical updates?" "No." "Did you request modifications to your monitoring status based on sleep disturbances?" "No, ma." "Were you aware that third-party recommendations influenced your administrative profile?" "No." They thanked me and ended the call. By the end of the week, the questions changed. They weren't about me anymore. Karen sent a text that afternoon, short, unfiltered. "You don't understand what you've done." I typed a response and deleted it. Then I blocked the number. The review moved fast after that. Not dramatic, efficient. the way systems move when paperwork lines up and there's no longer a reason to stall. I was asked to submit a written statement. I did. 2 pages. Clear, direct. No adjectives that didn't earn their place. Karen was asked to submit one too. She showed up at my rental that evening without warning. I saw her through the peephole standing too close to the door, hands clasped like she was bracing for impact. I opened it. "You can't do this," she said immediately. "You can't just shut me out." "I didn't shut you out," I replied. I removed access. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. "Old habits. They're painting me as manipulative," she said. "As unstable. They're reading the record," I said. "You let them believe I did this out of malice. I let them believe I did this with intent," I said. "Those aren't the same." She paced the small living room, agitation finally breaking through the control she'd clung to for weeks. "I kept things together. You were spiraling. I was injured," I said. "And you decided that meant ownership." She stopped and turned to me. "You don't know what it's like to stay behind, to clean up the messes, to be invisible while you get medals." I met her gaze. "You don't know what it's like to have someone rewrite your life while you sleep." She looked away first. "They're going to cut me off," she said. "No access, no contact." "That's what boundaries look like," I replied. Her voice dropped. "I was all you had." "That's what you told yourself," I said. "Not what was true." She stood there for a long moment, then nodded like she'd reached a decision. "I won't fight this," she said, "but you don't get to pretend you're the good one." "I'm not pretending anything," I said. "I'm being precise." She left without slamming the door, without another word. The formal notice arrived 3 days later. Clean, typed, unemotional, all third-party permissions revoked, all administrative inputs traced and corrected. My profile restored to baseline pending routine evaluation. No disciplinary action, no flags. Karen received a separate notice. I didn't read hers. I didn't need to. What mattered was what didn't happen after that. No more calls routed through her. No more clarifications made in my absence. No more decisions justified by concern. The system didn't punish her. It removed her leverage. I went back to the house once to collect the last of my things. Karen wasn't there. The rooms felt different without her presence pressing against the walls. Quieter, emptier. I packed quickly, left the keys on the counter. Didn't look around for nostalgia. That night I slept through without waking once. Not because everything was resolved, because nothing was intruding anymore. The next morning I reported in. Standard check-in, cleared to resume a limited schedule, shoulder improving, sleep still inconsistent but no longer flagged as a risk. When I hung up, I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand, letting the quiet settle. Karen emailed me once more from a new address. "You chose them." I stared at the screen, then deleted the message without responding. What I'd chosen was simple. Consent. Process. A life that didn't require someone else to stand guard over my decisions in the dark. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. By the time I turned off the lights that night, there was no sense of anticipation in the room. No pressure at the edges of awareness. Just darkness doing what it was supposed to do. And if someone had been watching before, there was nothing left for them to check. I woke up to sunlight on the wall and didn't know how long it had been there. That was the first thing I noticed. Not a sound, not a memory. Just light, steady, and ordinary resting where it always did in the morning. My phone was on the nightstand untouched. No missed alerts, no motion logs, no notes to decode. I sat up slowly and waited for the familiar spike of awareness that usually followed. The inventory, the scan, the question of who might be standing where I couldn't see them. Nothing came. The room felt neutral, like a room again. I stood stretched carefully and felt my shoulder pull in a way that reminded me it still needed work. The ache was manageable, honest, not amplified by exhaustion. I rolled it once and let the tension drop. Coffee tasted normal that morning, not too bitter, not burned, just coffee. I checked my calendar, clear. 1 meeting in the afternoon, routine. No annotations, no reminders written in someone else's hand. I drove to the base with the window cracked, letting air move through the car. The gate guard waved me through without a second look. The building smelled the same as it always had, cleaner, an old paper and something metallic you only notice when you've been gone for a while. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. They confirmed what had already been corrected. Asked if I had questions. I didn't. We shook hands, professional, finished. On the drive back, I passed the turnoff to the old neighborhood without slowing down. That surprised me. I'd expected something: anger, sadness, the pull of memory. Instead, it felt like passing a closed road that had already been rerouted. The destination didn't change, just the path. At home, I unpacked the last of my things properly. Not the frantic sorting from before, just putting objects where they belonged. Papers into folders, devices into drawers. A small, quiet reset. I found the notebook I'd used to track everything and closed it for the first time. Not because it wasn't useful, because it wasn't necessary anymore. In the afternoon, I took a nap. A real one, on purpose. Curtains open, no alarms, no backup plans. I woke an hour later with the same calm heaviness I'd felt in the morning. My body knew what to do when it wasn't being interrupted. That evening, I cooked for myself. Nothing fancy, protein, vegetables. The kind of meal that does its job without asking for attention. I ate standing at the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I thought about calling Karen, not to apologize, not to argue, just to acknowledge that things had changed, that they would stay changed. I didn't make the call. Boundaries don't need commentary. As night settled in, I noticed something else: the absence of anticipation. I wasn't waiting for anything to happen. I wasn't bracing for a sound. The hours unfolded without instruction. I left the door unlocked. Not as a test, not as a statement. Just because I didn't think about it. I lay down and let the lights go out when my eyes got tired. No breathing exercises, no counting, no strategic stillness. Sleep came the way it's supposed to, uneventful. At some point, I shifted positions and didn't wake myself doing it. At some point, the house made a sound and I didn't catalog it. At some point, the night passed. In the morning, there was no sense of loss, no victory either, just space. Later that week, I ran into someone from town, grocery store near the base. They asked how Karen was doing. I said I didn't know. They nodded like that was an answer they could use. Work picked up at a steady pace, not heroic, not overwhelming, the kind of rhythm you trust because it doesn't need constant correction. My shoulder improved, my sleep followed. One evening, I noticed something small and almost laughed at myself. I'd started closing my eyes without thinking about who might be watching. That was the real change. Not the paperwork, not the reviews, not the restored access or corrected profiles. It was the end of being observed. When someone takes that away from you, they don't leave a mark. They leave a habit. One you have to notice before you can stop repeating it. I stopped. The house stayed quiet. The night stayed empty. Decisions stayed where they belonged. And whatever Karen had believed she was holding together, it no longer required my silence to function.